Good evening, and welcome to another episode of Empower to Live. I'm your host, Andrea Rose Butler. Thank you for joining me on another Thursday evening. I am back in Mexico. I enjoyed my time there in Virginia, and I was great to see friends and family. In particular, loving to worship with my church family. But also, while I was there, as I shared before, I was ordained as an elder at my church on last weekend. Um, and I shared that it was such an emotional time for me, the journey of getting there. And I was just overwhelmed with the weekend. So the weekend before was my birthday, and then the following weekend to be ordained and consecrated into being an elder at my church was just such a growth experience for me. And I know that there is more to come and a lot of work to do. And so I'm super excited about that. Um, I know that God has a plan and a purpose for everything. And we sometimes we don't always understand the whys because it seemed like we got to this place, and I'm just like, but I'm in Mexico now. How does this work? But we're going to make it work. We're making it work. God has been planning this thing out. He knew this move was coming before I knew the move was coming. So He's got a plan on how this is going to work out for me being here, my church being in Virginia. We're still in communication. I still have work to do. I can teach from anywhere. I can minister from anywhere. And I know that God has a work for me here in Mexico, that there's a work to do. And so, again, thank you for all of those who celebrated my birthdays and the birthday wishes, those who came and supported me during my ordination. I appreciate all of you. I want to say thank you to you for being there and for supporting me and, during that time. And so much love and appreciation to all of you. And so now we're going to get into the reason we're here. So we are in part 3 of our series, Renew, Reset, and Restart. And tonight we're going to talk about how to reset your money mindset. So we talked, over the past few weeks about, the old habits in our first week, how to break those old patterns of behaviors in this new renewed you. We need to let go of those old behaviors and things that hindered and kept us from being who we need to be. And sometimes when we get fearful about life situations, we tend to fall back on what's easy. And so the first week we talked about breaking those habits. And then we talked last week about the mindset, having a new mindset for the renewed you. And so how do we, change our mindset? So we're focusing a lot about how do, we talked about, how bad do you want it? And then we ended that with renewing your dreams. And so for the renewed you, we have to, again, let go of those old habits. We need to renew our minds. And then we also renew the way we think about money, because I know a lot of times we think that, when we are called and we have our purpose, that, my money has to be right. And, my money has to be this. But you can do a lot of things. And when you're walking with God and He's given you a plan, He's given you a purpose, and you're walking into that purpose and you're thinking, well, where's the money going to come from? There are so many resources out there, and if we believe that God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and all the silver and gold is His, and we know that He equipped us to do what we're supposed to be doing, He will provide. And I've seen that happen in my own life, of God providing in ways that surprised me, took me by surprise, and I was just overwhelmed with, like, God, you did it. You said this is what you wanted me to do, and then you provided the resources to get it done. Where it wasn't put me in debt, and I had to put some on credit cards, and have to do any of those things. God provided, and so we have to change our mindset about money. How do we see it? How do you see money? And after this month and starting next month, we're going to be talking about finances over the next few weeks. I've got guests lined up for at least 2 of the weeks. Still working on getting another guest. But we're going to talk about money. And next week, we're talking about your money story. And so this is kind of where we are. It's like, what is your money story? Because your money story and the mindset that you have is based on the story that you grew up with. So what is that money story? Well, we're not going to focus on that this week. This week, we're talking about renewing your money mindset. So changing that. So what is a money mindset? So that includes your thoughts, your feelings, and your attitudes towards money. Again, that's your money story. And so I saw this quote said, the only thing that stands between you and your goals is a story you keep telling yourself. So what story are you telling yourself? And this could be about anything, not necessarily even about money, but what do you tell yourself about who you are? What do you tell yourself about pursuing your dreams? What do you tell yourself about reaching that goal and attaining that goal? What is the story that you tell yourself over and over again? A lot of times it's not necessarily positive. We have a negative, we, for some reason, and I'm guilty of this myself, that my mind will first always run to the negative before it goes to the positive of saying, what is possible? What does this make possible? Instead of saying, oh, I don't know if I can do that. I don't have this. I don't know if I'm not strong enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this enough. We talked about that a couple of months ago as well. About, we are enough. And I love it. I found this shirt and I wish I had worn it today that says, I am enough, enough, enough. And I am enough. And so we have enough. We have everything that we need. Again, also the premise of this Empowered to Live broadcast is talking about from 2 Peter that says that God has given us everything that we need to live this life, but also to live godly. And so we have everything that we need to live out the life. He's already given us everything that we need. So whatever it is that you're lacking, God has already provided if we just trust him in the process to know that he will provide for you. And I know that's a hard place, especially, if your story and your feelings towards money is a negative one. Or, we buy into the process of saying money is evil. And I know people quote that scripture, the love of money is the root of all evil. Money in itself is not evil. Again, it's about what are the thoughts that you have towards that. And I saw this quote that says, a wise man should have money in his head and not in his heart. So if our heart is focusing on, chasing that dollar and all this other stuff, and our entire focus and everything that we do, our entire motivation is about going after the dollar. We're running after that dollar. And, so we have it in our heart and it becomes our God. That's not a good place for us to be. And so that's when we would do whatever it takes to get whatever it is that we need. And that's why he's saying that we love it, where it's controlling, not that, that you shouldn't have it. But then when the thoughts of money and all this other stuff consumes you and it becomes your God. And so he wants us to get away from that thought of this controlling us. And so what are your thoughts, your feelings, and your attitudes towards money? And again, if it's a negative one, let's make some transformation. Let's come on, restart, renew our thinking towards that. And how do we go about changing and transforming our minds? Write it down. Think about how you feel about money. What are some of the first things? What's the first thought that comes to mind? And that's usually, it's like when you're taking a test and they tell you don't change your answer. The first thing that comes to mind is usually the right answer. The same thing. Write down what am I feeling about money? What's my attitude towards money? How do I feel about this? And then if you're looking at what you're writing down and it's negative, or it brings about negative feelings and emotions, maybe, you were told that you will never have And so, or you grew up in a poverty um, lifestyle, and you grew up and you thought to yourself, I'm never going to be in this place. And so no matter how much money you have, your mind is still controlled by the fact that you didn't have. And so you want to hoard, you want to have, and you do whatever, and you got to have it. So we have to transform our minds, just like the old patterns that I talked about in the first week. The same thing is true of how you think about money, how you feel about it. What's your attitude? Are you one to hoard, or are you a giver? Are you willing to let go? And I had this conversation with my brother um, when I was in Virginia. We were out. Um, in fact, he was taking me home after we went up for my birthday, and he had taught Sunday school that morning, and it was about um, the rich young ruler, where Jesus says that it's difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. And so we were talking about, why did he say that? Like, why was it difficult for the rich man to go? Because Jesus told him, sell everything that you have and give it to the poor. And, the Bible says he went away sad because he was wealthy. And so then that's what Jesus made that statement, that it was easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. Well, the eye of the needle, if you know anything about old Middle Eastern times, in the city gate, they had this arch that entered the city that camels had to go through. And if they were too laden, they had too much stuff, they couldn't pass through. And so it was one of the ways. And so the camel had to get down on his knees and basically go through. But then sometimes they would get stuck because the merchant had too many things on the camel. And so they would get stuck in the eye. And so they were forced to take things off of the camel in order for it to get through the city gate, the eye of the needle, which is, that entrance into the city. And the same with us. So, if you look at the fact that this camel was so laden down that it couldn't fit through something that was designed for it to go through. And so something had to be taken off in order for it to go through. The same thing with our mindset, with the way we feel or think, our attitude towards money. Sometimes we have to take off those old things, those old way of thinking and feeling, and our attitudes about it, and just about anything. So we're talking about money in particular today, but this could be for anything in your life that is weighing you down, that those old patterns, those old thoughts, all those things that make it difficult for you to go into what God has planned out for you. And so we have to let go of those things and allow us to be able to walk through and to go through. And so, maybe you're like, I remember, and I want to share this in the weeks coming, but I'm going to share this today too. There was a time where, money was funny and change was strange for me as a single parent of two kids. And I was working, what they be calling about the working poor. And so I was working, and at one point, and I've shared this, I've shared it in my book, I used to work for the 700 Club, our Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN, whatever you want to know, with Pat Robertson. And I was in their telephone development division. And we started out, we were making $6.30 an hour. And I was working 37 hours a week. And that was considered full-time. We had benefits, we had all this other stuff. But $6.30 is not a lot of money, even if you work 37 hours. And so a bunch of folks got together and they decided they were going to talk to the president of CBN and say, hey, we need a raise. We are like struggling here. We've got kids, we've got, a lot of us are working, we're on food stamps. This is going on, da, 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 da. And, we're working for you and you're giving millions of dollars away, but you have your workers that are struggling. And so we were like, we got to get more hours, can we get a raise, whatever, they went to him and asked. And the next thing we knew, we had a meeting And they decided that they were going to make us part-time. So we went from 37 hours to 20 hours. We lost all our benefits, but they gave us a 70 cents raise, but we lost, 17 hours and all of our benefits. So we had no vacation, we had no sick time, we had nothing, no health insurance, nothing. They took it all away because we asked for a raise. And so, they cut our hours, like almost in half, to give us 70 cents more. Well, we lost everything that we had. To say, as a single parent with 2 children who had a car payment and had to pay rent and all these different things, and still being able to give. And I would feed people. People come to my house, and spaghetti goes a long way. Let me tell you, feeding the neighborhood kids. I would have prayer meetings at my house, feeding people. I love to feed people. Those of you that know me know I love cooking, and I love to feed people. And but God allowed me to, even with the cuts that and even with that amount, I was able to buy a house. Ask me how. But God. And so I love that when our mindset is, I don't know how I'm going to make this work, but you know how. And, being faithful with giving and giving away, and still, not having to worry. Kids in daycare, because they were young, they were preschoolers. And, so having to pay for daycare, having to pay rent, having to pay car insurance, car payment, figure out groceries, do all this other stuff. Wasn't getting child support, none of that stuff. And so it was just my $7 an hour at 20 hours a week. And, but God provided. I was getting food stamps at one point, and then I got some reason child support. Misdirected child support payment that was supposed to go to my ex-husband's son, and he gave me $600, and they cut off my food stamps. And I was just like, "I only gave me $180," and they took it away. And I told us that it was a mistake, because child support was like, "Oh, we misdirected it. So even though you're not getting anything and you haven't gotten anything, we're going to subtract that from what you should have gotten," which is right, which is only fair. But then it was the only check I got. And so they were like, "Okay, so you want to come back?" And I was like, "Absolutely not." I said, "I'm not going to do that. No." I said, "Because I will not allow you all to control when I eat, when my children eat, no." And I told a lady, and I said, "You know what? God will provide, but no, I will not come back. I will not do this again." And I didn't. And God provided until, this was going on for like almost 2.5 years. And I remember the day when my supervisor, I was walking in the door, and he was just like, "Go see this other manager in the back." And I was like, "Why?" He was like, "Trust me, because the Friday I was leaving, he said, I need you to pray about something, and then we'll talk on Monday." And I was like, "Okay." And, coming in and I'd already bought my house at that, that's a whole nother face story. We'll talk about that another time. Or you can read my book, The Incredible Journey. And he said, "Go see her." And I was just like, "Why?" And I go back there, and she, I clock in, and I go to the back, and she goes, "I understand you want to work for me." Do what? I don't even think I've said 10 words to you since I've been here. What? And, she was like, "I understand that you want to work for me." Okay. And I said, "Doing what?" And she was like, "Being my admin." And I was like, "Okay. And what does that mean?" And the work expanded, and then my hours started increasing. They increased my hours because of the work that I was doing. And like I said, God provided, because we had not too long ago closed on the house. And, I was like, "God, you're going to have to provide." Because when I lived in Section 8 housing, it was controlled. But now it's not controlled. And the rent, the utilities that are higher, all have to be paid. I had to pay my own utilities, water, all the other stuff in the apartment. But the rent was more controlled, especially when we lost those hours. What God provided, He opened that door. And so when your mindset, and I grew up in Jamaica, when we grew up in Jamaica, this, again, my story was that I had one dress, one pair of shoes, and there were times that we didn't eat, not because that fact that we were poor, but it's because my father made decisions about what children should be and should not be, and whether or not we should live or not. A whole nother story. But my mindset could have been, I've been poor, I've been hungry, so why should I give? Why should I be faithful to this? How should I, why should I take, kids would come knock on my door and they would say they were hungry. Their parents, I don't know if they were hungry or not, but they came. Sometimes they followed my kids home. They got off the bus and everybody and their kids showed up at my house. And, I was like, I had plans of feeding us, and I have to figure out how I'm going to make this stretch to feed these children that are at my house now. And so God provided, and He provided for them. He provided for the people at work. I would cook and bring stuff to work, and feed people at work. And I was like, I don't know. And I felt like the widow Zarephath, where the meal didn't run out because of the fact that I gave, and that God provided for us, and so we never went without. Even at a point where we were on the struggle bus, and I remember I had a pack of chicken thighs, a box of corn muffin, and a box of macaroni and cheese. I had no milk, no eggs, no oil, no nothing. I don't know how I let that happen, but it did. And and I was like, God, what am I going to do? I have ingredients, but I have nothing. But I can't cook them. Chicken I could cook, but then how do we make the rest of the stuff? And I remember getting home, and my mother had mailed me $50 in cash, and it was in the mailbox, and I was able to turn around and go to the store and being able to buy stuff. And she didn't know that we were in the struggle, that this was something that was going on, because I didn't talk to her about it. But God knew, and He provided before I even got to that place where I had a need. And so when we look at, resetting and restarting and renewing our mindsets, we got to look at God. He will provide. He will make a way, for us. And so we've got to recognize money is a tool. It's a resource. If you have it, it's a resource for you. It should not be the end all of everything that you do, but it is a tool to be used to help others. And so when you look at it and say, God, it's passing through my hand. It didn't come to stay. And so when we have that open hand and are willing to give, then it will be provided for us. And so if our desire is to help others, if our desire is to go to school, if our desire is to write that book, if our desire, whatever it is, a lot of stuff we do takes money to do. Doing this, using this platform that I'm on, it's not free. But, God provided a way for me to be able to do it. And we keep going because this is my desire. I know this is His will. This is His plan for me. And so I have to be obedient in doing what He asked me to do. And so when we look at, our thoughts, our feelings, our attitudes towards money, we've got to realize that whatever the story was that you were told about it, it's time to rewrite that story. And we're going to talk about that next week. How to rewrite. We're going to talk about your money story first. And then I've got some guests lined up. And we're going to be talking more about, fixing or getting our money house in order. So how do we get our money house in order so that we can live the empowered life? So it's not about, getting the big house and the car. I don't believe in prosperity gospel. That's just me. I don't believe in the prosperity gospel, but I believe that God will provide for His people so that they can do the work that they need to do here in the earth, that we should be givers. And especially the way our economy is right now in the United States in particular. I mean, stuff is hard around the world. But, when I was in the United States, I was like, oh, I'm ready to go back to Mexico. I'm like, what did I buy? And it's like, why did I spend so much? It's hard. The economy is hard and it's going to get worse. And so the way we think about money has to change. The way we feel about, lending, giving to the poor. The Bible says that when we give to the poor, we lend to the Lord. And so when you lend somebody money, they pay you back. And it's not necessarily in the way you expect it to be returned back to you. So I just want to encourage you today, think about it. Like I said, write down. I'm a big proponent of writing stuff down. What are my thoughts about this? Why do I feel this way? What is my attitude towards this? When I think about money, is it something to be hoarded, or is it something to be given away? Not to the detriment of yourself, but also, we should be giving, given to God's house. We should be giving to the poor. We should be giving, to whomever. I'm not saying, being one of those people that, you lend money to people who, have no plans to pay you back. That's not what I'm saying. Not to be foolish with your money, but be wise in how you use it, and how you spend it. And we're talking about some of those spending habits as well. How are you spending your money? What are you doing with it? So I want you to think about some of those things. And also, if you have questions for my guest, she is, I'm not giving that away, but she's a financial educator. She has over 20 plus years in finances. And so she will be an awesome resource. But I want you to think about some questions that you may have about how to get your financial house in order, so that we can prepare for my guests when they come on the show. And then also for me to research as well about, how we can get our financial house in order. So there is the plan. And again, I want to thank you all for joining me for another episode of Empowered to Live. Again, catch us next week, next Thursday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time, 6:30 Central Time in the zone that I'm in. And I will see you again. Thank you again for all your support. And I appreciate you all. Catch you next week. Bye-bye.